In 1998, Steven Spielberg directed a movie that would change my perspective on World War II and on war in general. I remember sitting in the Tarrytown Diner after watching with my dad, and I can remember him distinctly saying it was the most accurate war movie that he's ever seen. When we saw it in the Palisades Theater so many years ago, I saw many veterans leave the theater. I guess this movie was just so accurate that it was just a reminder of what they really had gone through. Keen-eyed historians, when they take a look at this movie, they'll note its inaccuracies, but one can't deny its impact on filmmaking and its ability to remind us of a global conflict which sought to preserve the liberties of people and defend against tyranny. It also continues that tradition and theme that I believe most war movies strive for. It's to show the harsh and honestly brutal reality of war, but also the full spectrum of right and wrong that the human spirit has to endure. What movie is this? This is what we're going to talk about today in PB and Cashew, Saving Private Ryan. Hit it! What up, PB Cashewville? It's your boy PB. Before we get started in today's episode, got a special message from Cashew. Take it away, Cashew.
What up, PB Cashewville? It's your boy Cashew. I just want to give you a quick update. I am not going to probably be in the next two episodes. My life has been hectic a little bit. I have two jobs now. Need that for right now. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to be back. I will be back. I just don't know when. And I just want to say that everything's going good. And I also want to say just have a good time. Peace out.
Thank you so much, Cashew, and hopefully we'll be able to start seeing you back here soon. Miss doing episodes with you. Unfortunately, you gotta do what you gotta do, and I hope you're having an awesome time there, and we look forward to seeing you. So, today we are going to be talking about the great war movie classic Saving Private Ryan. So it's an all-star cast and includes Tom Hanks, Tom Sizemore, Ed Burns, Jeremy Davies, Giovanni Ribisi, Barry Pepper, Adam Goldberg, Vin Diesel, and Matt Damon, who plays Private Ryan. It describes the story of a squad of Army Rangers who were tasked in finding Matt Damon's character. He's a paratrooper in the 101st Airborne. Ryan, he's the lone survivor of four brothers, and to spare his family from the grief of losing another son, Captain Miller, he's a veteran company commander in the Army Rangers, played by Tom Hanks, has to go into Nazi-occupied regions of Normandy and bring Ryan back to safety. What gives Saving Private Ryan its sense of realism, I believe, is its primary use of practical effects. Most of the shots that you'll see in the movie are either shot on location or on outdoor sound stages. They rely heavily on relying on heavy computer-generated graphics. What most people will remember from Saving Private Ryan is its opening sequence depicting the invasion of Normandy on Omaha Beach. Various waves of soldiers pouring onto the beach were actually played by real people. It's not generated by a computer. In fact, the folks that played are the Irish Army and Irish Army Reserve. And what's interesting, too, is that many of them were amputees. So whenever there's a scene where someone's arm gets blown off and there's that authenticity of someone walking around without an arm or without a leg, that's an actual amputee who did it. This added level of realism was something that Steven Spielberg definitely emphasized because he felt that a lot of movies at the time just talked or from about World War II before just talked about how great and grand and how heroic and beautiful it was. But very few were there movies that actually showed its gritty reality. To help with this also, there's a lot of attentions to detail that is placed to it. So they decided to bring in authentic weapons, authentic costumes, authentic vehicles. It's pretty interesting also during the opening sequence where Omaha Beach occurs, there's actually two vehicles there known as Higgins boats that were actually used during the Battle of Normandy itself. The other added part of realism, too, was that Dale Dye, he is the technical advisor of this of the movie. And he always seeks to make sure that whenever there is a military movie, that the actors portraying it do the roles justice. So to help them prepare for this, uh, not Ed Burns, Ed Burns, one of the actors, as well as Tom Hanks, and all of them participated in a 2-week boot camp to help them understand how to read maps, do maneuvers. He shot ammunition at them just to make sure that it gives them that feeling of what it's like to be an American soldier during this particular theater of war. He taught them how to handle weapons, how to communicate with each other, and how to work as a team. To add to this further degree of realism, Matt Damon, who plays Private Ryan, he was actually excluded from this so that all of the characters that went through this boot camp would have this sense of team spirit and cohesion, and this disdain for Matt Damon, who didn't get a chance to do that. This is a spoiler warning, so if you've never seen it, I highly encourage you to definitely stop the video and go back and maybe check it out on Amazon Prime. I think it's on Netflix, and it's about 2.5 hours. It has a lot of very harsh language. There's a lot of violence in terms of it. So if you're like little kids or you're watching with little kids, you may want to make sure that they're not watching this. But if you're a little bit older and you can kind of help and do some question and answers with your kids about it, that's something that I definitely would encourage. In addition to this already extensive cast, many other well-known actors make small cameos. So Bryan Cranston of Breaking Bad fame appears in the movie. Dale Dye also plays a role in the movie. He's the one who's put them through all this training. But the ones that was really interesting to see was Paul Giamatti, Ted Danson, and Nathan Fillion. Nathan Fillion, a lot of sci-fi freaks will really also know that he plays the main guy in Firefly, and he's amazing in this one. He looks like he's super young. I didn't even notice it was him when he actually played it. And it's a nice little added touch to see a lot of these actors who have gone on to bigger and better things, that they had small roles such as this. And so it was nice to see that particular touch. The cinematography of Saving Private Ryan is one of its major strengths. One of the things that Steven Spielberg chose to do is really be able to shoot the perspective from the characters. So during the opening scene in Normandy, you see it through the perspective of Tom Hanks's character, Captain Miller. And you see the grittiness, the unease, the real sheer brutality of war. The fact that left and right, there's soldiers that are completely getting destroyed and decimated by enemy gunfire or mortars. There's that confusion, there's that fear, that sense of uncertainty of what to do, and that's so well conveyed in terms of how it's actually shot. But often in this movie, well, not really often, but spread out throughout the movie are these really poignant shots. Like there's this one shot where they are coming up from a ridge, and it's the typical thing that you'll see on the trailers for it, where they're coming up and it's their silhouettes upon this horizon line. And it's the way that it's shot also is one of the major parts of it. But sometimes there's these shots that you'll see where you're almost eased in and eased out of war. The best one is when we take a look, it's almost at the end, where Jeremy Davies, Tom Sizemore, Ed Burns, and Adam Goldberg, they're just sitting on the stoop of an abandoned town. But them being Americans, it looks like your typical stoop that you'll find in Chicago, a typical stoop that you'll find in Brooklyn, a typical stoop that you'll find in like St. Louis, kind of places where these guys are all from. And it looks as if they're just back at home and they're just enjoying a quiet afternoon together. But then sooner or later, the other thing too is the sound. As soon as there's this rumbling of tanks that comes, it pulls you out of that almost near fantasy kind of world. That pause, that little bit of a respite, understanding that, hey, we're now back into this craziness of war. another key element of Saving Private Ryan is the character of Timothy Upham. Jeremy Davies, who plays him, was great. He is an interpreter that's hired by, or that's taken by by Captain Miller to help translate, but he's just this almost a raw recruit. He has not seen combat. He's only fired his weapon in basic training. Then all of a sudden, he's now thrown into this group of veterans that have been through Africa, through Italy, and now have just survived all the rigors of Normandy. And because of that, he's somebody that sticks out like a sore thumb. Tries to understand what they're going through, but you can see the way he acts, the way that he talks, the uneasiness, the lack of confidence in this situation, that he's really someone completely different. What makes it even interesting too is that all of these folks that he's in this squad with, he actually outranks. He's a corporal versus the rest of them are privates. They're privates or privates first class, but since he's a corporal, he technically outranks them. But because of the lack of experience that he has, that naivete that he has, he's kind of looked down as like, you know what, you're just some guy that we have to endure, and unfortunately also somebody that has to protect. What's sad, though, is that he has this romanticized ideal, and he does, of what war is like, how war should be fought. And because of this, he has a great degree of uneasiness, and as we see in later on in the movie, it gets a lot of people killed. There's this one scene where he's supposed to resupply everybody with ammunition, but because his fear takes over him because of that lack of experience, and it ends up getting so many or it decreases the chances of survival. It looked like it's a situation where it seemed kind of hopeless, but it's much better to have that fighting chance by doing everything right. The sad thing with Upham is that he, I think, represents what a typical civilian would think. We think that war is this great, glorious thing, and that it's just this. You ultimately understand the bands of brotherhood, but that's those bands of brotherhood that you'll see that's depicted in so many other movies and series is that it's conflict, it's struggle, it's challenges that help mold those particular bonds between soldiers. An outsider who has not seen that or has not experienced that, as Upham hadn't, is not going to understand what that world is like. And the folks that have seen that world, they're going to take a look at you and say, this is a place that not only do you not belong, but because you're here, you're actually a liability to it. But the thing that we do see with Upham is slowly but surely he does grow a little bit. And you have to cut the guy some slack. This is his first kind of combat mission, but with the other guys, they've been fighting since Africa. And they're war-hardened veterans. So probably if you gave him the same amount of time, he'd have the same thing too. It's one of those tropes and one of those things that you'll see in most war movies. That naive guy that doesn't know what they're doing, the newbie, the FNG, as a lot of people would consider them, and a lot of the vets would always sometimes look at these folks, and this is something that I've learned through Band of Brothers. They'd have heartfelt sorrow for these guys because they wouldn't serve unless they really try to focus. Most likely, they won't survive because they have this misconception of what war is like. And one of the things I've talked to my father about war is that I have sometimes that tendency to do that. I have tried my hardest to write war stories, to try to see if I can capture how it is and try to capture the jargon and the spirit of it. But in truth, I've never experienced it. I've never seen it. So I will never really understand what it's like. So I always think that how do these other folks that have never experienced war write so well? It's by asking the right kind of questions to the folks that have gone through it. in the production of this movie, extensive interviews, tons of books were read. In fact, some veterans were really asking to tell the story from the soldiers' perspective, what they went through, the hardships that they went through, the bonds that they formed. And once that was done, in once you had that particular research, then you have the ability to write that story. The one time where I was able to do that was I had a exercise in my master's writing class where we had to interview somebody, and normally dad does not like to talk about his wartime experiences, but he actually gave me the opportunity to do so. And what I found was when I tried to write now a war story with that in my head, hearing the voice of someone who actually went through it, that was what allowed me to write a story that had more authenticity. And this movie definitely oozes with that. There isn't that sense of naivety, but also learning how veterans responded to new guys helps to flesh out a character like Upham completely. I'd asked my dad the same question that many of the characters in the movie ask: Is all of this worth saving just one person? And my dad answered that it didn't make sense that the higher ups would make such a decision, risking the lives of 8 men just to save one person. To a certain extent, throughout the movie, it's a theme that reverberates. It's supposed to be more of the individual or a smaller group of people benefiting the larger group. So, for example, when in the Battle of Normandy, as people are going through trying to make it past the German lines and trying to get towards the defensive positions of the Germans, smaller groups of people are risking their lives to open what's known as a draw, to create an opening for people to be able to get through. So through that, there's a sacrifice of in from Tom Hanks's perspective, at least 3 or 6 of his men die immediately in this effort to be able to get people to get through. So through the sacrifices of 6 people, a draw's open so that the rest of the army can come through. That's the basic mindset. Small group or individuals doing something for a greater group. The thing that makes everybody wonder is the opposite also just as noble? And that's a hard question to definitely answer. Logistically, numbers, moral, it makes no sense. One is not worth 8. The best way to that the movie tries to help answer that equation, though, is that that war is a constant state of chaos, and as William Tecumseh Sherman states, war is hell. And one way that the characters, especially Tom Hanks's character and Tom Sizemore's character, portray it, is that the actions to help maybe one person escape that chaos earns everybody the right to also escape that chaos. How it works nicely in the movie, though, their decision to do that does the same theme throughout the entire movie. That the small group of people, in its effort to help this rather large group of people, in its effort to help one person, ends up helping everybody, because at the end of the movie they are able to hold this bridge, which then becomes a major victory for the Allies, because now there's a way for them to get their resources across France. That really didn't happen historically, and believe me, there's a lot of historical inaccuracies in terms of it. But from the essence of a story, that's definitely one of the things that we can appreciate about it. My parting thoughts about this movie. the story about the what's known as the greatest generation, I don't know if there's going to be as many. I'm glad to see that there's a lot of movies still out there, still from a rather modern time, like American Sniper. The most recent one that I've seen that I think didn't get a lot of attention was The Covenant. A lot of these great movies that aren't just shoot 'em ups, or not just this rah rah boom explosions, let's kill Hitler uh, uh, spectacles. There needs to be more really that tells the essence of the story. I really like Band of Brothers. Band of Brothers is and without Saving Private Ryan, however, you wouldn't have the template and the resources and the knowledge to do something like Band of Brothers or later on The Pacific, because like the Saving Private Ryan set the standard for the World War II movie. Movies like Dunkirk, movies like 1917, which is also interesting because I think now we're also taking a look at certain wars that we also probably don't watch too many movies at. All Quiet on the Western Front, not too long ago, was met with a lot of acclaim, but it still managed to capture that same lesson of how it is a brutal thing and how it has the capability, not just not has the capability, but it does have that. War has this way of just ripping your humanity out of you, and it takes a lot of strength and it takes a lot of discipline to be able to still retain that level of humanity. But the in this day and age, it looks like our heroes that we see are more of the fantastical kind, and we don't take the time to really take a look at real heroes. Now, there wasn't a Captain Miller or a Sergeant Horvath, but there were a lot of men that really existed. Guys like John Basilone and Audie Murphy. If I mention names like this now to a 16-year-old, unfortunately, unless he or she reads up on it, they might not know who those people are. And that's sad that we live in this particular time and age where sadly our heroes aren't real. And that's what I love about movies like this. It talks about a generation, or captures that spirit and character of real people from almost how many years? Like 70 years ago. And because of their efforts, one thing that I always like about the Great Generation is that they gave up so much and they endured so much. And nowadays we have a generation that just seems to be so comfort oriented. And I also speak for myself because I'm like that too sometimes. But to be reminded of there was this generation that endured the depression, grew up in it, and as soon as they're coming out of the depression, they have to go and give up their youth to be able to go and stop tyranny overseas. And I hope that there's still the story, the concept of that come from this time period will still continue as we continue on in terms of our history. There's a lot of revisions and uh, elimination of certain things. And I really hope that as we continue to move forward in this day and age, that stories like Saving Private Ryan and stories that talk about the grittiness and also the sacrifice that young men and women gave in order to fight for our freedoms, I hope that that's something that will still continue. And it does too. There's still many out there, and I'm happy for that. What I'm just hoping for is that it will definitely continue. Because we take a look at our freedoms, but we have to understand that our freedom did come at a cost, and understanding that cost helps us appreciate it even more. That's it for this week. We hope that you enjoyed this episode. And hopefully we'll have Cashew here next week to be able to do another one, and to be able, because I do miss having him, and to really be able to enjoy the new sound systems and the sound room that we had here. But until then, hopefully he'll be able to make it. But as we say every week, We don't know you, but we love you, and there's a God above that does. I'm PB. Peace out, PB Cashewville.